Welcome to GameFellas, the Retro to Modern Gaming Podcast, episode 14. Let me introduce everyone. We got one of our resident British guys here, Sorren. How you doing, Sorren?
Hey, yeah, I'm doing good, thanks.
Yep, Sorren is sporting the TNG backdrop in celebration of Picard being a good show, which I agree with. Next, we have Justin, our other resident UK brother. How you doing, Justin?
All good. All good.
Good. We have our producer, Derik Moore, in the background off camera, who will be fact-checking us tonight to make sure we don't screw up anything. How you doing, Derik?
I'm doing good. Hope you guys are doing well.
Thank you, Derik. And we have a very special guest tonight, Pam from the Cannot Be Tamed YouTube channel. Perhaps you've heard of it. She covers retro and modern games in her own unique little style that she does. And Pam, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast tonight.
Yeah, thanks so much for the invite. I love guesting on podcasts, and it's been a while.
Yeah, I've seen that you've done some other ones. And don't you have a podcast? Is it Media Mavens or something? Some other.
I did. My co-host moved to South Korea, so we have not recorded an episode together in over a year now. But
so that's a heck of a time difference, yeah, to get over. We have enough trouble with Justin and Sorren being in Britain recording, but yeah, I understand. Yeah. So, okay, cool. Well, later on in the show, I'm going to let you talk all about your channel, but we'll start off with what games we've been playing. And since you're the guest, why don't you get us started, Pam? What you been playing lately?
Sure. So I've been playing Suikoden for a little while.
Ooh,
I used to really like JRPGs when I was a kid, and then I sort of fell off them a bit. But playing Fire Emblem Three Houses kind of made me think maybe I would like to try a few more. So everyone suggested Suikoden 2, but then said, nope, you have to play the first one first. So I have been playing through that. It's apparently quite a short one, which appeals to me, but it's good so far. I like all the characters, and it looks really pretty. I love that it went sprite-based rather than polygons. And yeah, my biggest complaint right now is that there, at least as far as I can see, is no map, and I'm often lost.
Yeah. I played the second one. I never played the first one. Why did people tell you to play the first one as opposed to the second? Because I played the second and had no issues really with the story that I could tell.
I heard that there was some characters that sort of continue through the series, but I kind of think people are just being kind of completionist about it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's how I feel about it's like I want to play new Final Fantasy games, but I feel like I can't unless I go back and play every single one, from the beginning, because I haven't played through them all. So I understand. Okay, so Suikoden. Is there anything else you want to tell us about Suikoden? Is that how you pronounce it? Am I mispronouncing it?
I think that's how you pronounce it.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I've also been playing Indivisible, which just came on Game Pass, and it's kind of a strange one to explain. It's got like a lot of platforming in it. You go in a party of 4 characters, and the combat is interesting. It's kind of like a turn-based fighting game almost, like very combo-based.
Is this a new game or is this an old game?
This is a new game.
Okay.
It's just came out last year, and it's got beautiful artwork, and it's got this cool story about a girl who has to avenge her father who was slain in the beginning of it. And as she meets allies, she sort of absorbs them into her brain, so they all sort of travel around the world together. And it's very cool and very unique. I haven't really seen any game quite like this before.
So what is that on, Pam?
It's on, I think it's on all the consoles. I'm playing it on Xbox One, but I'm pretty sure it came out on Switch first.
Okay, yeah.
I'm going to jump in here. It is actually pronounced Suikoden.
Suikoden. Okay.
As a dumb redneck like myself, I should have known the first 3 letters. That's how you call a pig.
Suikoden.
So I'm gonna have to jump in because we had it. Me and Sorren played this on the PlayStation originally. We would have pronounced it Suikoden. So I think that's the the correct pronunciation. But just while you're at it, sorry to jump in. It is definitely the one that you should have played first. It is fantastic. And it has a really good build-up of all the characters and is one of the first ever video games to make me actually cry. There you go.
Oh,
Wow.
Not spoiling it. You have to go through it and you'll find out why.
All right. So from Justin, from the man himself, there you go. Anything else you've been playing, Pam? Anything else, any games you want to talk about?
Sort of picking away at Jedi Fallen Order.
I finished it a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
What do you think of it?
It's extremely derivative.
Yeah.
Which isn't the worst thing in the world. It's just as I play it, I just am constantly reminded of other games. It's like, oh, this is like the start of Uncharted 2, and this is very much like Tomb Raider, and oh, this is like Titanfall. But it's okay. I have some issues with how they kind of trying to make it a Metroidvania, which is not super working for me, especially since like the new paths you open up usually end up with like an ugly poncho. It's like, oh, thanks. I'm glad I explored so I could get this ugly piece of equipment.
Yeah, I noticed that where I'm like exploring everywhere, and the collectibles just weren't that great, honestly. Yeah, you got an ugly poncho to wear, or just customizations for your lightsaber, which you don't really see because it's so small. Really stuff like that. I did enjoy it, but I got frustrated with the boss fights and a couple of the situations that it put you in. I felt like the gameplay is very Dark Souls-like, I thought anyway, but just not quite as good, like not quite as balanced, I guess. Like in Dark Souls, you die a lot, but it never felt cheap. And I feel like in Fallen Order, it feels a little more cheap, the deaths, and especially the boss fights. I had major issues with those.
I agree. There's sometimes when I fight a boss or a bigger enemy and I'm just like dead almost immediately, like within 3 hits. And then I don't really like the parry-based combat. I have played very little Dark Souls, and it's just like, I'm a Jedi. Like, why do I have to parry this stormtrooper before I can hit him? Like, just let me force choke him to death, please.
I know, right? Yeah. It is cool when you can I loved force pushing guys off cliffs. That was like my favorite thing to do, was swing down and be like, bah, and off they went. But yeah, it's good, but not great is how I would describe it. But if you could make it to the end, the end is really cool. The last like 10 minutes, 15 minutes of the game almost made it all worth it for me, where it was like, wow, this is really cool. But Sorren, we'll move on to you, man. What have you been playing?
So to be honest, not a great deal different to what I was playing, because a while back I decided to start playing Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition because I bought the Switch version.
I've been playing it too.
Oh man, that is quite an undertaking, isn't it?
It is. Well, I'm playing it co-op with a buddy of mine, so that's even more of an undertaking. Yeah.
No, I'm like probably about 80% of the way through now. But that, to be fair, that is because I'm like proper like going around and trying to do all the side quests and everything, and just really, really enjoying it. But yeah, that I've been playing for a long time. I'm pretty sure I spoke about that the last time I was on the podcast. But the other game that I played, because I decided to kind of put that down, occasionally just to play something else. And I got into a game called Killer Queen Black, which I think I have mentioned before, which is this, I think it started life as like a co-op multiplayer arcade game, like literally like a massive arcade machine with, I think, either 6 or 8 places, so that you could have like either 3-on-3 or 4-on-4. I forget how many it is.
Derek's got it in the chat. It looks like that.
You got it. Yeah, so it's a really bizarre game. It's all contested on one screen, and it's your 2 teams. You've got the gold team and the blue team. Somebody on your team plays as the queen of your like hive, because it feels kind of like like a beehive, but it's more kind of like alien. So somebody plays as like the queen, and then everyone else plays as just the workers. And basically, you just need to win by one of the 3 ways to win, and the ways to win are so funny. Like, I just love how this game works. So you've got the standard military victory, which is just kill the other team's queen. Then you've got the economic victory, which is
an economic victory in a game like this.
So with the economic victory, the workers can like go and collect these essentially like little balls of like pollen and bring them back to the hive.
Okay.
And if you fill all the slots up, you win an economic victory. Or the third victory, which is the one I basically go for every single time, is the snail victory, where in the level there's just a snail, and if you get on him and ride him back to your side of the screen, you win.
Okay.
And that's it. Like, it's
Wow.
it's just kind of crazy multiplayer mayhem, and
You can play with up to how
really
many
fun.
people? 8 people?
I think 8 people. I'm pretty
Wow.
sure. So I'm playing it on the Switch, and I'm pretty sure that very recently they added an update so you can play with 8, even on one console.
Okay.
But
That looks like fun. That looks very cool. Do you remember when that console, the Ouya, came out? Do you remember that thing?
I do remember that, yeah.
Okay. It had an exclusive game called Castle Fall or I forget the name of the game, but it looked a lot like this sort of fighting game, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But maybe
See,
Derik
you're probably thinking of Towerfall.
Towerfall, yeah, not Castle
And
Fall.
that is
Towerfall.
on pretty much all the systems now.
It is now, yeah, but it was an
Yeah,
Ouya
good
exclusive at the beginning, if I recall. It was like the only exclusive that thing had. I've still got my Ouya collecting dust in that drawer over there, but yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Killer Queen Black it's really fun. I think the only thing that kind of lets it down, which isn't really the game's fault, is that there's just not, or at least as much as I felt, there wasn't that big of a community. So when I was playing online games, me and my friend who were playing couch co-op, we were going online and essentially running into the same groups of people every time we tried to do new matches. And that's even considering that it does crossplay. So it's not like we were just trying to match with other Switch players. Like, we're matching with anyone who's got the game. So that's unfortunate, because I think this game deserves a larger player base. Like, it's definitely the kind of thing I could see being like, in esports and things like that. Like, it's got that kind of competitive nature to it, and it is a good game. It's a good game. But yeah, that's pretty much all I've been playing recently. Like, just that and loads of Baldur's Gate.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And Baldur's Gate, I'll talk a little about it because I've been playing it too. But okay. Move on to Justin. So Justin, what on your Switch have you been playing?
Yeah, because that is all I play. You're absolutely right. Well, yeah, this is tough because I was obviously on quite recently. So you've all had a chance, well, maybe not you, Zach, to actually go and play some other games. I found myself actually recently on the SNES Online part of the Switch, and I don't actually know why. I didn't kind of go through it and think, yeah, I really want to play some SNES games. I think I was like, I was looking for 5 minutes of just, okay, I just want to do something before tea, and could that have been any more English? There you go.
Before tea.
Yeah. Sorry.
Earl Grey, hot.
All just for the fans. One for the fans. And one of the things I absolutely love on there is Kirby's Dream Course. And it's actually, this comes into one of the topics quite nicely later. Is, I mean, I don't know if you know what it is. It's based on the Kirby franchise. It's effectively like a golf-esque game, but Kirby is the ball. And so you have to clear a set of courses, and it's not simple. It's quite challenging in that Kirby's the ball, so you have to send him off of walls to hit angles and stuff. But the hole isn't predefined, so you have to sort of go through the enemies that are inside the course, and the last enemy left turns into the hole. So you kind of have to plot your shot so that you hit the different enemies and end up in the hole.
I didn't know this game existed.
Okay, so yeah. Now, interestingly, I never had this on my SNES, but I don't know if you remember the Super Wild Card, which was the plug-in that went in the top of the SNES, and you could put floppy disks in the side. So it was effectively.
Are you kidding me? Really?
No. Yeah, it was.
Was this a European thing, or was this in the States too?
No, it was an import from Asia. It was like the first hackable. I've actually got one. I actually bought one years later. So Super Wildcard sits in the slot, and then you put any cartridge in the top, and then you could, because if you think the game sizes were like tiny, you just put them all on a floppy disk, and the entire SNES library you could play off a floppy disk. It was like the original kind of piracy, I suppose, for SNES. Anyway, so hi to Mark who's listening. We're talking about piracy.
Poor Mark.
Yeah, no, he's always going to get that. And that was when I first played it years ago, and it really took me. I just thought it was quite cool. I do like the Kirby franchise, and I thought that was quite cool. So that's one of the opening games on the Switch.
If I had to compare that game to anything, just by looking at it, it looks kind of like Marble Madness, almost like the perspective, sort of that pseudo 3D perspective. You know,
I do indeed. Yeah, it's very similar. It's got a little bit of challenge to it as well. In fact, it is quite challenging as you get sort of later on. The other thing is when you travel through certain enemies, they give you like a kind of a bonus capability. So one of the enemies it gives you a jump capability. So as you take the shot, if you go through the jump enemy, as you're still rolling, you can then press the button to do a jump, which means you can go through, you plot your path to jump, then get in the last enemy that's the hole. You kind of have to play it to get on board with it. It is slow. We'll park that for the topics later, but it is cool. But that I kind of actually periodically go to and from because I actually quite like it. But I for the first time in a long time, I played Super Mario World, which contentious this may be, I still believe is the best Mario game in the entire franchise.
I agree.
I know that is potentially
contentious,
divisive
because a lot of people think that Yoshi's Island is better, and I don't think so.
That I think is one of the oddest statements any video gamer could come out with.
Dude, that's a very popular opinion nowadays. I feel like a lot of people. I don't even consider Yoshi's Island a Mario game because Mario is a little crying baby. You know, it's like it's more about Yoshi than Mario.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you're both wrong. It's clearly Mario is missing.
I mean, that is a classic.
Okay.
That is
Sure.
a timeless classic. But it reminded me of how much I used to play this when it first came out and I first had my SNES. And there's 3 save slots: slot A, slot B, slot C. And I used to literally on rotation go to slot A, do all 96 levels, which is all endings of all levels. Then I'd fill slot B, fill slot C, erase them all, and go through again. So I thought, well, fine, sod it. I'm going to see how quickly I can get through a 96 full completion. And so off I trot, and that's what I did. I think it took about, I don't know, 5 or 6 hours maybe.
To do to fill all 3?
No, to do
for the one. Okay, that sounds right.
So to do a complete rotation.
Yeah, doing the Star Road and then the super secret levels after you do that. Yeah, all that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it again brought back a lot of cool memories.
I could do a whole podcast just on that game. I mean, I love it. It's I haven't played it in a couple of years, but it's so easy to go back to, and the gameplay is so good, even by today's standards. It's
I think
kind of a magical game.
It is, and I think apart from, again, I don't want to ruin the next bit, but apart from kind of how much it meant to me growing up, that game is 30 years old, and it stands absolutely solid as a rock. And I'm like, that is just the ultimate test of time. So that's predominantly what I've been playing. I haven't had much time to play anything else. I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to move to next. I'm being teased into taking Final Fantasy VII and playing the original. And I'm
why don't you just wait for the remake to come out?
Because it's not the same.
No, I guess not. Yeah.
It's not the same.
You want those blocky ass characters and janky gameplay.
I'm comfortable with the HD remake. I'm not comfortable with the full remake, although I do want to play it, but it's not the same. So yeah, I'm like, I'm like, shit, do I want to play the original only to then have to play the remake? And I'm like, oh god.
Yeah.
Anyway, you'll soon find out. Whenever I'm on the next podcast, you'll know. But yeah, so that's it for the moment.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Justin. We'll move on to me, and I don't have too much to say because I've been playing the same stuff I've been playing, which is Outer Worlds. I'm deep into Outer Worlds, probably about halfway through the game now. I love it. I think it's great. But like Pam was saying about Fallen Order, I think it's derivative of other games. My only complaint really would be that, it feels familiar. A little too familiar maybe in the game from a gameplay perspective. Of course you've got the shooting. It's basically a looter shooter RPG, but The characters definitely keep it interesting. I really have been enjoying the characters, enjoying some of the kind of creepy side quests you go on. You know, like, I don't know, you land on this moon. I think it's called Monarch, and it's kind of the outcast moon that the corporations don't have a hold on. And there's all these hardcore people living out in the wilderness there with all these crazy alien monsters, you know. And I fought my way through the wilderness to get to the settlement, and then they send you on all these crazy quests looking for things, and you find cannibals and you find all kinds of weird stuff out there in the wilds, you know. And it's just great. I love it. It's very cool. But the whole you know, do a quest and little green dot appears and follow green dot to quest point kind of thing. I feel like the game really holds your hand a lot in that regard. I mean, I guess that's just how most games like this are these days. But I guess you can turn that off, I guess, if that's a, you know, optional thing and a time-saving thing if you want. But, you know, it is very familiar, I guess, in that way. But otherwise, the setting's very cool. I love any game that can take you to an alien world as opposed to, I don't know, like, what was it, Assassin's Creed Unity or something, I think was the one that was in France where they modeled Paris, like every detail of the city. That's really cool and all, but I like games that take you to somewhere you haven't seen before, you know, and Outer Worlds definitely does that. Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition is the other game I've been playing, like Sorren was saying. With my buddy Donald, we've been playing it for about 2 months now. I think we're about halfway through the game. We play one night a week for maybe 3, 4, 5 hours sometimes, and it's great. The Enhanced Edition has really made it a lot better. They got rid of a lot of the jankiness and the ability to see the entire map when you zoom out and your guys walk around. I don't know. I'm guessing that wasn't in the original. I don't really know. It's been decades since I played the original, but
yeah, no, the zoom. The zoom, I'm pretty sure they added for the Enhanced Edition.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that just makes it so much easier to find your way around. And obviously, you can zoom way out. I play on my 4K monitor, so I can zoom, like, you can see a whole bunch of the terrain. And if you're in a town, you can see most of the town. Very cool. So yeah, Baldur's Gate has been a lot of fun. And lastly, I'll mention this briefly, but I'm going to talk more about this during our next topic. But Pam's topic, which is how to approach playing older games, that's what we're going to talk about, inspired me to pick up Out of This World today. Maybe it's called Another World, I think. Over in Europe it was called Another World. But Out of This World was a game I played on Super Nintendo. I know it was originally on PC, but I played it on Super Nintendo back in 91, 92 when it came out. And it's just kind of a magical, creepy, atmospheric type game. I think it inspired games like Inside and Limbo and some newer ones, games like that. But I went back to it I was literally playing it right up until we jumped on the podcast here because I was starting to get hooked. I was like, oh man, this is so cool. I remember this. And the game, like, the polar opposite of Outer Worlds, it doesn't hold your hand at all. It's like every step in this game, if you make one wrong step, if you miss a shot, you're dead, and you go back to a checkpoint, sometimes pretty far back, you know, and you got to do the whole thing over again. So yeah, the part that Derek's playing right now is exactly where I was, going down these elevators, and you got this alien guy that helps you out. You help him get out of the cage, and you got the beast at the beginning of the game that chases you. Oh, it's just such an iconic game. I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with it. Even if you haven't played it, I'm sure you've seen it before. Very cinematic game. I'm playing the Genesis version, which is really good, but the music is not as good as the Super Nintendo. I think the Super Nintendo is kind of the definitive one. Oh yeah, this is literally a comparison that he's playing. It's playing them side by side. Graphically, they're identical, but the music just isn't quite as powerful as the Super Nintendo. I'm not sure what they did, but the Super Nintendo one had a really good score. But anyway, I'm going to talk more about that later in my experience with that when we get on to our topic. And speaking of that, let's move on to our first topic here, which Pam was nice enough to come up with for us. And I love it. I think it's great. So how to approach playing older games today. So in my opinion, for some gamers, I think there's a bias when it comes to playing older games. I have a lot of people that say, oh, I can't go back to it. I can't play that game. You know, basically, if a game doesn't fit a certain set of modern standards, it's frequently dismissed as outdated or unplayable. The same could be said for other forms of entertainment too, though, like, movies. A film like Casablanca could be seen as a slog compared to today's hyperactive storytelling style. Movies have to move so fast these days to keep people's attention, But just because something is deemed old, does that automatically make it not worth experiencing? What's the best way to go about playing a video game from, say, the 1980s today in the year 2020? Pam, why don't you start us off?
Sure. I guess just to start off, what made me think of this comment or of this topic was whenever I have any criticisms of older games in my videos, and I guess I'm kind of coming at it from the other side, people usually tell me either it's because I wasn't born when the video game came out, which is completely untrue. Or
you could look at that as a compliment, I guess, but I see the way you're thinking of it too. People are just assholes. Yeah.
Yeah. Or, oh, well, you don't understand what games were like then, or you are judging a game from 1990 from today's standards. So I was just thinking of like, what, concessions do you have to make for those older games versus like, what are things that, it's totally correct and fair to criticize games on. I guess in general, what I think is, having a good idea of what other games were like at the time, like not asking for anything that wasn't being done then. This is an easy example, but like, you can't look for realistic graphics in a Super Nintendo game or something like that. But I think, there are things to certain conventions that retro games use that can sometimes not really fly well with me now. When I was 10 and I only owned a dozen games and I had plenty of time to play them all, like I could try something over and over and over again or look for every little secret. Whereas now that kind of thing, I'm just like, I don't have time for this. I find this annoying.
That literally happened to me today when I was playing Out of This World. It's like I died. I got really far. I died, and it took me all the way back. Not only does it make you sit through the cutscene again, but it makes you do this cage rocking thing where you got to go back and forth, and it takes like 30 seconds. So yeah, games weren't as polite about your time as they are now. What else? What other observations have you got about that?
Well, the other thing is sort of about secrets. So I never played the original Legend of Zelda until a couple years ago, but I did have Star Tropics, and I played that a ton when I was a kid. So it always makes me like, it's kind of amusing because whereas when I first played Zelda a couple years ago, I found it very annoying not knowing what dungeon to go to, not knowing where every little item I needed to progress was. Whereas I loved Star Tropics and still do, but it's mostly because I have it memorized, so I don't get stuck on those same places anymore. So yeah, it's just sort of like how tastes evolve and what you're looking for in a game, no matter when the game is from.
Yeah, that makes sense. And like I said, it's really about games respecting your time more now than they used to. I think back then, especially in the 80s and 90s, there wasn't nearly the amount of games being released as there is now. There wasn't, we didn't have smartphones in our hands. We didn't have all these other things we could be doing, these entertainment things we could be doing at any moment, any given moment. So games were, they had to artificially inflate the length of these games, and I think you're right. That definitely is something that makes a big difference. And for me, it's like the way I approach playing older games now is I understand not everyone can do this, but I try to put myself in the time the game was released. And I do this with movies too. I'll watch a movie like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which was done in 1954. And to me, it still blows my mind watching it because I put myself in that time and I'm thinking, wow, they had all these special effects. They had all this underwater filming, all this stuff, this is amazing. But I can see where if you don't do that, it'll look corny, for a lot of people. So that's part of it for me is being able to put myself in that place. A game like Out of This World, like I said, I just played the game is very cinematic, which was, I remember having my mind blown back then thinking like, wow, this is, like you mentioned, the Super Nintendo is not supposed to have realistic graphics, right? Well, I honestly think that game at the time was probably the most realistic looking, just the way it was almost like rotoscoped, the way the characters moved. And it was really, really pretty interesting. the way they did that. And it's still impressed me. When I turned that on today, I was like, oh man, but part of that is my nostalgia. Like you said, Star Tropics for you. It was easier. It's easier for you to play because you know the game, because you grew up with it. But Zelda was annoying because you didn't know it, So do you think, like, one thing we didn't have back then also was guides, really. It was hard to come across a guide unless you had a magazine or you called a hint line. Yeah. I remember spending money calling hint lines and spending my parents' money, a couple times for games that I got stuck on. And nowadays, a lot of times, even if I get stuck in a game, I have my phone, right? Like literally, when I was playing Out of This World today, I got stuck at this part. I'm like, I tried it about 5 times and I'm like, I'm done with this. So I pulled up my phone, looked up a long play on YouTube. And I'm like, oh, that's how you do it. I went and I did it,
Yeah.
So do you think that's...
Sorry.
No,
I think back to, I've always been a fan of point and click adventure games, and now they seem so obtuse, and like the puzzle solutions are just completely bizarre things you would never think of. And I don't even know how I got through them when I was a kid before the internet was a thing. Like, I guess it must have just been perseverance that I completely lack now.
Yeah, I would just give up, I think. A lot of point-and-click games back in the day, like Day of the Tentacle was one that I never was able to beat because I just would get stuck and I wouldn't know what to do. And so I'd do it for a certain amount of time, then I would just move on. I'd be like, okay, I'm going to move on now to something else, there's a lot of games I never finished that I went back and finished now because I can pull up a guide online in about 2 seconds. Justin, Sorren, what do you guys think? One of you, Justin, you unmuted first. You go.
Yeah. Well, first of all, have you still to this day never completed Day of the Tentacle?
I have not.
Right. Here's some homework. Go and play that game. It's amazing.
The remastered version or the original?
I don't give a shit which version you play. Okay. Go and play it. It's one of the finest point-and-click adventures of all time. And now you've got no excuse because you can look it up on your phone.
That's true. Yeah. Point and click is a perfect example of a genre that I should play again, because if I get stuck and get annoyed, I can just pull it up.
Exactly. That is, I mean, that's an absolute classic. That I think you've probably covered a lot of the things that really kind of round this topic off. It was the question posed was, how do you approach playing these games? I think what's important is, it depends who you are and what your age is. So did you live through these things? So is there a form of nostalgia, but can you appreciate them because you lived at that time? So you can remember those things. So that's very much a different thing. I know it's very on vogue at the moment for younger people younger than me, to go and play retro games and say, oh yeah, I'm really into retro games. And I think that's a fashion thing rather than anything else. Yeah. I think what you said about putting yourself in the time is super, super important. You cannot judge anything that was created 30 years ago on the standards of 30 years later. It's impossible. And that's not just graphically.
Well, a lot of people do it though.
And they're idiots. And it's just utterly ridiculous. You can't, it's not just the qualities, it's the capability of what that piece of hardware could achieve. So for example, one that springs to mind, I remember, I looked this up. So I just remembered it was on my 12th birthday, which will come as a shock to everybody. That was 1994. I got Donkey Kong Country for my Super Nintendo. And Donkey Kong Country, like every games manufacturer at the time and every console manufacturer at the time, it was only at the end of a console's lifetime that you truly saw the games that really brought out what that console could achieve. Donkey Kong Country literally blew my balls off. The graphical prowess of what was there, the sound, everything. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. It literally... It
was so clever how they did it too. I mean, it was a 3D game packed into a 2D, because they pre-rendered it all on a PC, right? And then they digitized it. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Pixels. Just mesmerizing. And if you go back, you kind of look at it now and, it kind of looks a bit janky and cranky and it's maybe not that great. And, at the time it was
still plays great though.
It does play great. And likewise, I remember, it's actually funny if you can kind of remember your thought process of when you played a certain game, and then if you go back to it. So another one, I can remember when we got a PlayStation. So we got a PlayStation at the end of 1995, and one of the first games that we got on the PlayStation that Sorren will remember was one of the original games available for the PlayStation on launch, was a game called Destruction Derby. And I've gone back and game. I think it's Demolition Derby in America.
I think it was Destruction Derby. I had it on PS1. That was a great game. Yeah.
That if you play it now, oh my god, it just looks horrible. Oh, we've talked about this before. Your whole the polygon era of the early PlayStation.
Derik's got it pulled up, and it's the early polygons are. But I mean that's opinion. That's your opinion though. Like there's guys, and Nate is one. Nate's one of these guys. One of the other guys on the show. He grew up in that era of PS1. That was like I think that was around his just. That special time, what is it? We've talked about this before, between the ages of like 8 and 12 or whatever. It's that kind of magical, nostalgic time in your life.
Gaming puberty.
Gaming puberty, there you go.
It's true.
Whatever console you played during that time, for me it was the Genesis, right? And the Super Nintendo. So I'm most fond of those. For Nate, it was, PS1 and then 64. So he still likes that. He likes that graphic style. People like that. It's really, it's just about opinion, really.
Yeah, and I don't dislike it. I think it's more to prove the point of how it looked at the time and how it felt was very different to how it plays now. So you can go back and I can still enjoy the nostalgia and I can still play those things for what they are. But if you start to judge it by newer standards, it's not going to work. I think it is. That is probably one of the most important things. You have to appreciate what it is, what it was. And another thing as well is you kind of, I think you have to accept that you might not like these things. So I think it's a very bold statement in the video game community to say, I played Zelda for the first time and I thought it was crap. It's basically what you said. And you know what? Yeah, it probably was. And there will be an absolute army of people who listen to that comment and want to, burn you at the stake.
But, that's true.
But the truth is, if you didn't play it then and you go back and you try and play, it's like when people romanticize the Atari 2600. Okay, if I
can't go back to it. I've tried.
I would love to say, oh my God, I'll go and play it.
There's plenty of 50-something guys out there that are like, oh, the Atari 2600 was the greatest.
Of course, and I get that, and I understand it, and I appreciate that. But for me, well, here's my question then. Go ahead, Pam. Go ahead.
I think there's some genres and some types of games that age better than others. Like the Zelda kind of gameplay, it isn't really something that's carried forward a ton. Whereas like a good 2D platformer is still a good 2D platformer. Most people, I think, would agree. Like even if you grew up with the PlayStation 2, you could probably still appreciate Super Mario Brothers 3, but you might not appreciate Zelda.
Right. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Well, how about this? I'm going to pose a question. Say you have a niece or nephew or kid Justin, you have some kids. So, how old are your kids again?
9 and 10. 9
and 10. Okay, so if you're going to show them an old game, how do you approach it? Like, you can't really tell a kid that age to put yourself in the time frame, But how do you sell it? Like, how do you? I'm sure you've tried. Like, I'm sure you've tried to get them to play old games, right? And how do they react? How do you sell it to them? I'm curious. Yeah, I think same for any of you. If you have stories, I have nieces, and I've tried, and they're usually bored, but they're very young too. So, yeah, I think the thing to remember is it's a hard sell because they're judging it on their frame of reference, and their frame of reference is now. So, I remember when Billy, as my son, was younger than he is now, and we watched an old cartoon. It wasn't a game; it was an old cartoon. It was quite English. I don't know if you had Danger Mouse. Do you have Danger Mouse? I don't know.
We'll assume I remember watching on Nickelodeon when I was a kid.
Okay, Sorren will know what Danger Mouse is.
Anyway, Duckula.
Yeah, correct. They're both from the same studio, absolutely, and they're both very British. And when Billy saw it for the first time, he said, what's wrong with the colours? That's what he said. And he said, Now, what was wrong with the colours was that this was an 80s produced cartoon with a washed out palette, not some crazy Japanese or American hypey. And so he thought it was broken. So what is interesting, though, for him, again, frame of reference, is that what is perceived as retro has come full circle. So there are plenty of games that are released now that have pixel art. So he associates them very similarly. So actually, something is easier for him to go to. So a Super Mario World is doable because he would play New Super Mario Brothers on the Wii. So to him, there's no real major difference there. So you can approach things like that. I think, however, you're in trouble beyond 16-bit. If I try to go to 8-bit, we're bang in trouble because there's a color palette of 16, and it's like I'm dead. So that, and you can sell all you like. This is all we had when I was younger. So imagine like you're playing this today, whatever he's playing, and when you have kids in 20 years' time, 25 years' time, 30 years' time, whatever, it's going to be all these like virtual reality and all this, and they're going to look at that and think it's rubbish.
Do you think
it's tough for them to process?
Do you think it matters the age maybe you start him at? Because I got a friend named Paul, and he has his daughter's 3, I think, and he's playing like Pac-Man and stuff with her, and she apparently likes it, but I think he kind of... Okay, for instance, my niece Ellie, I've played the new Toejam and Earl with her, but she'll sit on my lap and I'll let her like kind of pretend to play, with the controller, and I'll move, around, and that seems to go over better, So our question is how to approach playing older games today. So how do we approach? Sorren, you haven't said anything. So how would you suggest to somebody like a kid or even someone who's not into video games who wants to try an older game? What do you suggest?
Okay, so the kind of the idea I had on this was that I think, because kind of going on what what you guys have been talking about, if you've got a couple of things you kind of need to weed out first, because for example, like I think Justin said about how, if you're going back to something that you played, like you've been playing Super Mario World, right? Now, a 2D platformer that looks as beautiful as that is going to stand the test of time anyway. But if you're going back to like a, really kind of polygonal PlayStation game or N64, I mean, I love the N64, but those games are ugly. But like, for me, it's the nostalgia of playing it. Like, that's what I really, because I remember playing them. So if you take that away, because you've got people who are going to kind of look at things through rose-tinted glasses, but then you've also got the school of people where you could present them like, and it doesn't matter if it's a game from 30 years ago or a game that came out last year, you could present them with the greatest RPG ever made. And if they don't like RPGs, they're not going to like it. Like, you're not going to convince them that it's good. So I think that the best way that I've seen that companies have approached this, getting a newer audience to go back to older games, is actually a little bit what Sega have done and a little bit what Nintendo have done. So both of them. So Sega, actually, they're more on this than Nintendo, like way more on this, but they have taken a load of their old games and put them on mobile. Because a lot of their old games, like the Sonics and Streets of Rage,
the
and
Sega
Golden
Classics
Axe
collection or whatever.
Yeah, they put them on mobile phone. But they are, they're shorter games. They're games that you can just kind of, play for 5 minutes. It kind of seems like a really good fit to have that on mobile. So I think that's one way. But the other way that both those companies have done, Sega and Nintendo have done, which I think is probably one of the best ways to approach it now, is because times have changed, and I don't think this is just a case of, like you, Zach, you were saying that, games companies kind of made their games harder because, there was only so much content, and they wanted to like string it out. And
there wasn't nearly as much competition as there is now for your eyeballs.
Yeah. But exactly, and you've also, society has changed to, everything is instant. Like, there's instant gratification. Like, if, like you've said, if you want to work something out in a game, you no longer have to spend hours just trying and, doing tons and tons of trial and error. You can just Google an FAQ. You can just look up a
Yep.
YouTube video. You can, just instantly. So to tap into that and to tap into the whole idea of don't waste the player's time, I think Sega and Nintendo have done that really well, with Sega with their classic collections and Nintendo with their NES and SNES Online, in that they've added those features to, to add save states, to add the ability to rewind your gameplay. Like, if you try something and you fail, if you were playing Another World, or I forget what you call it, is it Out of This World?
Out of This World, they call it over here, yeah.
So if that, I don't know if that is on any of those collections, but if that was on there, you wouldn't have the issue of, oh, I fell off that platform, now I've got to go back and replay this entire bit. No, you just hold the trigger and rewind a few seconds.
That's a good point, Sorren. I didn't think about that. How companies like Sega have done that, and they've made the games more forgiving in hindsight. They've gone back. They haven't changed the core of what the game is or how it plays, but this made it easier, by adding save states and rewind features.
Just added some of those quality of life things that we've gradually gained over time to those harder games. And I mean, there's a group of people out there that seem to have an issue with, like, I saw this discussion on Twitter like a couple of weeks back of people saying, oh, if you complete this game on NES Online using the rewind feature, then you haven't technically completed it. It's like, maybe just let people enjoy the game. Like, who cares if they're playing it?
The butthurt around that comment is unbelievable. I do not go a day without going on my Twitter feed without people getting in an argument about, you're not a real gamer. You're not a real gamer because you used the rewind
ridiculous,
feature. Man.
What the hell? Yeah, it's so stupid.
You told me Pam was contentious. What do you think about that?
Well, when I first saw that tweet, I just posted a jerk off gif, so that's what I thought about.
Boom.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, the only way I ever beat the original TMNT NES game, which I love, by the way, the only way I ever beat it was save states on emulator. I cannot beat it just on an NES. There's no passwords. It's ridiculous, It's like, so yeah, it's so silly.
Also, can I just quickly point out, though, just to be pedantic, that the reason that these games were originally difficult is because there was only so much they could pack onto the cartridge, and when they were charging £40 a time, they had to kind of justify the existence of what was on there. And of course, it is well documented that Nintendo originally did that and made some of their games super hard because of the rental market, which we have talked about before.
Yep.
It was to actually keep people, but they got more money through rental than purchase. So, yeah.
Go ahead, Pam. You were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's a really good point about making use of those, because how I approach older games when I play them and when I review them is, I will put myself in that time from a technical standpoint, but I can't pretend I don't have 100 games on my backlog to play, or that I'm willing to invest that much time. So use those save states, look up that walkthrough if that's what you need. But technically, you have to remember what was possible at that time. Like, I played Kirby's Adventure for the first time 5 years ago, and I thought it looked amazing, because for a Nintendo game, it does look amazing. I mean, compared to Super Nintendo or something now, not so much. But I do try to remember what other games were doing at that time, and look at those things that make it a little bit special, or in some way that it's pushed the technology forward or really stretched its capabilities.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a good point you made about from the technical end of it. I think is an easier sell than the gameplay, because if gameplay is considered antiquated by today's standards, and like we were talking about, doesn't respect your time as much, it's a harder sell than I think like you said, the graphical points of the game. Graphics are more subjective, I think, because it's art, right? It's more subjective than gameplay, because if gameplay isn't fun, it just isn't fun, I guess. And if it's frustrating, it's frustrating. But I don't know. Everything's subjective nowadays. It's like, what's fun to one is not fun to another. You said that, Pam, you said Zelda. You didn't have a good time with Zelda, but, I'm sure I can already tell you there's lots of people I know that would disagree. And
how many that just played it for the first time recently?
Probably none. That's a good point, man. That's a great point.
I've never played it. Are you talking about
Really?
the original? Are
The
you talking about
original Zelda, yeah.
on the Nintendo?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I've never played it. I've never
Yeah.
played that, and I've never played the Adventure of Link. My first Zelda outing, which actually maybe wrongly then I say is by far the best Zelda game, is A Link to the Past, and that I can pick up and play it and tell you it is. It's a brilliant.
Yeah.
There you
You're
go.
right.
I'll go and play it. I'll go and play it and tell you.
There you go. Tell us.
Yeah, you
I'll
can tell
do
us.
it.
Funny that a lot of people who are complaining about anyone who hasn't played Zelda until now have never beaten it themselves. I'll put money on it.
Yeah, that's probably true. Pam, didn't you do a video on was it Super Metroid recently?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I did.
and you had just played, yeah, and you had and I got on you for not playing the original, but it's like I can't blame you, because as much as I love the original, a lot of it is nostalgia, because that was the first one I played. I played it when I was a kid. I loved it. I spent hours and hours just exploring the dungeons. There's no map. I think that you said that was your biggest obstacle, is there was no map, and so, but you could just have a map open on your computer screen while you're playing.
I mean, I thought Super Metroid was a very good game. I just had
Yeah.
like some control issues
Right,
with
yeah.
it. Like, I don't think the wall jumping is good or friendly.
No, it was kind of annoying.
And then everyone who has played the game over and over again tells me, no, it's actually easy or just bad. So,
Yeah,
you know.
Well, I had a similar experience to you with Super Metroid, because I didn't play it until I think I was in my late 20s when I played it. I didn't play it as a kid, and I liked it, but I didn't. I had issues with it. But a lot of people say it's this perfect masterpiece of a game, and that's fine. I guess for a lot of people it is, but and again, it's because I didn't play it as a kid, I can't say it's the masterpiece. I don't know. So anyway,
I think some of the issues though is because people did grow up playing them, and they're they do look at it through nostalgia goggles and that. But there's a lot of those old games where it does feel like controlling a fridge in a shopping cart. It's not they're not smooth at all. And I guess
Resident
that's
Evil
the limitation.
Resident Evil 10 controls.
Yeah, exactly. Resident Evil was awful, but I mean, in terms of the you could have something that is really, really great and is critically acclaimed and all of that, but if it's not your type of thing, I remember I have a friend who I can't remember exactly what his wording was, but he played Portal, the first Portal that came out, and I think that was still the one that got tons of awards and was groundbreaking and that. And essentially he was like, no, this is boring. I can't shoot anything. I can't
Portal,
work out
man.
what to do. He's like, no, this game is crap. And I'm like, yeah, it's only just won every award going or whatever. But it's definitely a crap game.
I didn't play Portal until years after it came out, and I still loved it. I thought it was great, but yeah, I don't know.
So it's all very subjective. Definitely,
it is. Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint exactly the right or wrong way to approach playing a game. And we got to face it too, video games have been around now since the 50s, but mass market since the 70s, right? So there's so many games and so many what generation are we on now? Are we on is it the 7th, the 8th? Are we going into
I think?
Yeah, so it's just insane when you think about it. And now someone mentioned, maybe it was Justin, it's come full circle where we're getting a lot of, I think, did Super Meat Boy start the whole pixel art, the whole resurgence of pixel art games? It was some indie, maybe that game and Rez or whatever that really brought pixel art back again, and now you're seeing games that are low poly count, indie games that are coming around. It's crazy, so I guess one person's trash is another person's treasure is the moral of the story. I don't know. So anyway, all right, I think we've had a good discussion here about this.
Just want to jump in to say we are in the 9th generation.
Thank you, Derek. 9th. Okay. With the PS5 and Xbox Series X or 9th are going to be 9th?
No, they'll be the 10th.
The 10th. Oh my God. Okay.
Also, can we point out that Sorren's on the next generation? Boom.
You won't get that unless you're watching the video version. All right, we'll be right back. We're back, and we are here for our second topic. which Pam also came up with for us, which is once popular genres that need to make a comeback. Now, Pam, you and me have a game in common that I think fits into this category that we both very much like. That would be this game, The Guardian Legend.
Yeah.
Which I noticed that your Discord avatar was from the Japanese box art. That was cool.
Yes.
Yes. So I know we both love that game, and it's part shmup and part, I guess, Zelda kind of. I don't know. I'm not sure, overworld Zelda type gameplay, but for me, shmups are obviously a genre I love, and I know you like them too. And they need to make a comeback. I think it's too bad we don't have Mark on. Mark is like the resident shmup enthusiast. But start it off, Pam.
Shmups, also run and guns. There's not a ton of those now. All of these genres like have some indies and things bringing them up again. Yeah. But
well, look at what here's a good example. Look at what Konami did recently. They released a Contra game. They called it a Contra game.
Oh
what was it called? Rogue Core or something like that, I think.
Yeah.
And I didn't play it because I thought it looked so horrible that I just couldn't bear it. And I watched some reviews and people just completely trashed it. So I think that you could probably chalk that up to they didn't give the dev team that they had do it. They didn't give them any budget to work with. It looked really cheap, and just I don't know. I think it strayed too far from the core of what a run and gun is supposed to be. Maybe, Sorren, you were laughing when we were saying this. Why were you laughing? What's your thoughts on this?
No, I agree. I just find it funny that Mark's not here.
I know, right?
I mean. Do you know, I was saying to you earlier on the Discord and that I found this subject kind of difficult because I looked at it and I was like, well, we used to have a certain amount of genres, and as far as I can tell, they all still exist and have just splintered off into many subgenres. So it's
right.
I found it very hard to think of a particular genre rather than say like a particular game or game series that has disappeared. But to pick an actual genre. But then the more I thought about it, I thought, well, actually, there probably are a few that, although maybe one or two games still come out, they're definitely not as popular as they used to be. So for me, it was arcade racing. So your stuff like through the years, we had things like Outrun, we had like Ridge Racer, and then slightly more recently, like games like the Burnout series. It feels like that has definitely all geared way more towards simulation racing games, and you very rarely get just a crazy, silly arcade racing game. And I think the same can be argued for sports games as well. So I know that on a few episodes back, I was mentioning how I actually really liked FIFA 19.
FIFA,
because I don't particularly care about football. But
soccer
on football, but I don't particularly care about it. I don't really follow it. But FIFA 19, I really enjoy because they added these stupid modes that you can turn on to make it fun. Like you can turn the referee off, so there's no rules. You can make it so that you score 2 goals if you score like a really like far goal from outside of the box.
So it's not like just a pure simulation anymore. They actually it's like remember the NFL Blitz games? You remember those? Those were kind of like a more arcadey kind of silly. Or the if you go even further back, the Mutant League games, on the Genesis.
Yeah,
another example. You don't get a lot of I guess you could say mainstream popular games. And that's what I was going to say is we could try and if you want to narrow this down a bit, make more sense. We could, because obviously all genres still exist. There's still plenty of shmups being made. There's still plenty of run and guns being made. They're just indie, so we could keep it to super popular AAA type titles. Like how in the world would you bring the shmup genre back in the AAA sphere? I don't even know where to begin with that, or run and guns, or like you said, even an arcade racer, a AAA arcade racer. How would you do it? You have any ideas how you could go about it?
So I think like probably off the top of my head, the best way to bring current generations back into any kind of genre or anything like that that's kind of dwindled is probably pick an IP that people are going to, because, you know, people are going to see something they recognize, like some sort of intellectual property that they like and recognize, and that's going to draw them into the game. So that's one way. And probably the other way is similar to on the last topic, is mobile gaming. You know, like even if that's just the gateway into them exploring other games and other things, if you can, you know, like shmups, if you want to repopularize shmups, give it an IP that people recognize, make it a short little mobile game, start to build up that popularity again, and I think it would, you know, you'd probably then see a rise in shmups again. But I think that's probably the way you do it.
Yeah, like the closest I can think of to a AAA game that had shmup elements was Nier Automata. If that's even AAA, maybe that's AA. I don't know, but it's like, yeah, I think with the problem with AAA games now is, and I notice this the more I play them, you know, it's like they're all RPGs now, or they all have RPG elements. They've all kind of leaned into that idea where you have to keep building your character up and collecting things. And there's no AAA games that are just simple anymore. You know, just simple, straightforward gameplay. Like I could visualize a 3D AAA shmup that just you collect power-ups, but just with the production values of a AAA game, it would be amazing. You know, it would be, but no one's going to take that risk, you know, because you're talking about most shmups you can beat in, you know, half an hour, you know, maybe an hour, some of the longer ones, you know. I think Thunder Force 4 takes about 40 minutes, 45 minutes. So it's like, who's going to spend, you know, $50 million on a game like that, you know, with more simple gameplay without all these other elements added in, RPG, you know, primarily RPG elements. You know, I feel like all genres have merged to the RPG now, where everything is an RPG if it's a AAA game, you know.
Well, I think you've kind of slightly touched on one of the issues I think we have, which luckily indie gaming is kind of bringing us back from.
Yeah.
But I remember it would have been quite a few years ago now, because I think it was when the you know, when they rebooted Tomb Raider. I don't know if it was the first one of that reboot or if it was the second one, but I remember reading an article where they talked to the devs about the fact, you know, they're making this game, and it had, you know, whatever the crazy budget is that game has, like several $1 million or something. And one of the things they said it was a lot. But one of the things they said in the interview was that they wanted to, I think it was, they said, if we don't sell over like 5 million copies, we'll consider this game a failure. And I'm sitting there thinking, 5 million copies, like that's
crazy.
That shouldn't be, like,
you hear that a lot
under
now.
5 million. That shouldn't be a failure. That's crazy. Like you've worked yourself into a corner there where you kind of feel like you need to pump that much money into a game to make it appeal to people, but it then means you need to sell that many copies. So I'm glad that indie games are kind of, you know, changing that trend. But I think that's maybe part of the problem is people are, like you said, they're scared to take that risk because they think they might have to put that kind of money in. But then maybe one of the other ways is Kickstarter. Like literally today, I saw that I forget what the company is. I think it's Platinum Games. They've have launched a Kickstarter for The Wonderful 101, which was a game on the Nintendo Wii U, and they're basically like, they launched a Kickstarter. They're going to be bringing it to Switch, PlayStation, Xbox, and I think maybe that's the way you do it. Like that, you know, something like Kickstarter is kind of a really good way of doing it, because you kind of test the water and you see what the interest is without having to take that leap of faith and potentially waste a load of money.
Yeah, and it's been proven that, Kickstarter, certainly there's plenty of examples of failures, but there's also plenty of success stories as well. But going back to AAA sphere, you don't see AAA games funded on Kickstarter because it just isn't, there isn't enough money. There's been some movies, I think, like, what was it? Was it Veronica Mars that got funded on Kickstarter, like for them to do a movie or whatever. But that's, you're talking low budget. You're talking, under 10 million. I mean, what look at trying to think of, what do you think a typical Assassin's Creed game costs nowadays? Probably $100 million or so. It's ridiculous now. The prices of these games are just astronomical. And again, it would just be interesting to see what a AAA run and gun would look like. Like what would that really look like? Like Pam, what do you think? What do you think a AAA, even if it's not, if you can think of another genre that would, that's not popular anymore, that came back as AAA, what do you think? What do you think it would be? How would you do it?
See, I don't think the games even need to be that expensive. Like some of the genres I'm thinking of are like the 2D games, just because everything again has been like 3D and open worldy and RPG but like one of the only AAA ones I can think of for like just 2D platformers, other than like the occasional Mario game, is Rayman by Ubisoft, which is like a big developer, but again, it's been a number of years since the last Rayman came out. I think it doesn't need to cost $200 million to make a game in this genre. I think it should have more modern graphics. Like I think when people see games that use pixel art, which a lot of the run and guns and shoot 'em ups do,
yep.
When they come out, people associate that with indie for some reason now. Like I don't know that a big studio could really get away with doing something like that. But I was hoping that after the success of Cuphead, which is both run and gun and shoot 'em up, that
right.
like more people would take that on with like different art styles and things. But I haven't really seen it happen yet.
Yeah. I think we had a discussion about, we've had many discussions about Cuphead on this podcast, and me and Mark had a discussion about it where we were saying that the art style is really what sold that game, even more so than the gameplay. Because I'll tell you what, I guess you could consider me a pretty hardcore shmup and run and gun player, and that game is hard for me. Like that game is really, really, really hard. I still haven't beaten it, but I love it. It's fantastic. But yeah, in that case, I hate to say it, but I think the only reason it blew up like it did was because the art was so unique, at least for nowadays, Yeah, and I don't know what the budget was on that. I know it was an indie developer, but they ended up going way over budget and mortgaging their houses and spending a lot more money than they originally anticipated to really make the game as good as it was. So, I mean, you could almost, technically it's an indie game, but I'd almost consider it like a double A, if you want to go in that, by measuring games by the amount of A's, I would say it was almost a double A type game experience. Production values were just through the roof, for the type of game it was,
but you see, okay, can I jump in now?
Sure.
Yeah, again, boring business Justin, here he is, makes his appearance later in the episode. If you are to believe the sort of romantic story behind Cuphead, it's lucky. It's okay. It's a great game. The art style 100% is what everyone's bought into. I mean, it's artistically a masterpiece. And again, if you buy into it, the guys sold their houses, sold everything they owned, liquidated every asset they had, and threw it because they believed in it, and that's fine. It's also foolhardy, and the reality around whether we like it or not, AAA titles and all this it's a business first and foremost. Their primary goal, sorry for everyone who's listening, is not whether or not you enjoy their game. Their primary goal is to recoup more money than they spend producing the game. That's
their corporations.
It's just a fact, and so risk is not big on anyone's radar in any business. And the reason that you won't see AAA arcade style races is it ain't going to generate the kind of money that you're going to put into it. I'd love it, you'd love it, and 100 other people would love it, and they'd be way out of dollar. And so that isn't going to happen.
Even if it was 1 million other people love it, it still wouldn't be enough, because 5 million in sales isn't enough for the latest Tomb Raider game or whatever. So
exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I've been, I'm definitely not going to go into the numbers, but I've been lucky enough with, being attached to some of our friends, mutual friends in San Francisco, let's put it that way, to be given a bit of an eyeball on some of the figures. Mm-hmm. And it's an interesting insight into that side of video game production. And it's scary. It's actually very, very tough to recoup and to even break even, and that's very hard. And I suppose, that's why you won't see genres. I think you were saying earlier, there's no real genres that have gone per se,
Right.
but there's those that are in the public demand based on who the biggest consumer profile is. And one of the biggest consumer profiles is probably people between, I don't know, maybe between 10 and 25, and they have mobiles, and that's why mobile gaming is huge. So someone would back something that is a complete rip-off of Candy Crush Saga, because the chances are loads of people will download that crap on a phone. But someone's not going to go and do something that's maybe going to be more appealing to us, which is disappointing. So unfortunately, your AAA arcade racer is unlikely to make a comeback.
Justin, actually, just kind of spinning off a little bit what you're saying there, I do agree. I think, at the end of the day, any games company is a business. They're not going to take a massive risk on something when they can, make something else that's almost like a guaranteed moneymaker for them. But from the flip side, from the consumer side of things, something I often see is basically the whole idea of put your money where your mouth is. People like to talk about different things that they like and dislike in modern gaming. A classic would be the whole loot crate thing and the season passes, and you'll get people on both sides of that argument. But it's, at the end of the day, a business is gonna, surely operate on supply and demand. So if as a company you've made a game and you've pumped it full of loot crates and all these extra DLCs and cosmetic things that you can buy, and
Battlefront
you've
2.
done all that, yeah, exactly. If you do all of that, and then as the consumer base you go, no, we're not interested in that. And then something like what is it, Jedi Fallen
Order? Yeah.
So
exactly. That was a response to the Battlefront 2 backlash. So okay, do your single player game.
But then, but as the consumers, you've then got to back that. You've got to say, okay, well, we've been complaining. You've given us something we want. Well, you've got to show that developer and that publisher that if they make that, you will buy it.
I'll tell you what, it worked because, at least for me, because I bought Fallen Order for that exact reason. I'm like, this is a Star Wars game I want to play. And I did enjoy it. It could have been better, obviously, for the issues we talked about. But I would much rather get a game like Fallen Order than a game like Battlefront 2. Just loaded with garbage and just rushed. And I think it was the first Battlefront didn't even have a single player mode. It was just all just online. So. Yeah, it is an interesting conundrum. It really is a business at the end of the day, and like you're saying, the DLC, the season passes, the loot, all that is to recoup the costs, the money that they spend on these games. Not everyone is as lucky as Chris Roberts with Star Citizen that has people just dumping money on his lap for years now to make the ultimate game of his dreams. You
mean to get paid to not make a game?
Yeah, they're making the game. It's just taking, eons. But
you've got so SHMUPs is an interesting one because I don't really care too much for SHMUPs. However, if you go back to the 80s arcade, SHMUPs was pretty much a game of choice for everybody.
The Asteroids is a shmup,
Asteroids is a shmup.
The original, yeah. So sure,
you could argue Space Invaders.
Space Invaders also is considered a shmup. Sure,
a shmup. I know some of my favorite games of that era were vertical scrolling shmups because they were fashionable, they were appropriate, they were fun, and they in turn would have got people putting money in an arcade machine, and so they were a good return. They guess they just have not continued, and so they're not mainstream. But I've actually got a few to your original, kind of topic here. The genres that need a comeback, just for thought. So one that I'm a big fan of, which you could argue hasn't gone away, but I think a lot of people would say it did, was the classic 3D platformer. So yes, yeah. Mario's always going to be a 3D platformer, but the likes of Banjo Kazooie and those houses that produced some of the greatest games of the 90s, they fell away, and with the re-advent of Laylee, which, to your point about Kickstarter, was interesting to see. Look, are there people out there that are interested in this? And that Kickstarter, I think, pulled something like £2.5 million. It's regenerated a franchise and a company, and away it's gone. And I'm a massive fan, again, maybe this is generational, I'm a massive fan of 3D platform games that have got all of the things that you expect to have in them: collectibles, nice simple puzzles, some challenging puzzles, some this, that, and the other. So I think there's definitely a market for them. I would like to see more side-scrolling beat-em-ups. So I think they have fallen away, and I'd like to see more. So
Streets of Rage 4 is coming out this year, so there's
Streets
that.
Rage,
Hell had to freeze over for that to happen, but it is happening. So it's not a AAA game, but it's about as close as you're going to get to probably a beat 'em up being, a AAA game. I would, in this day and age,
Yeah, but they don't need to be AAA games. I don't think we need. These don't need to be AAA games. At the end of the day, if something's produced for the right audience, the right amount of people on the right budget, and it makes money and the people like it, that's great. That kind of works. So, again, back in the day, I'm thinking of something before Streets of Rage. I would have been thinking like Golden Axe is a game I don't know if I played.
Double Dragon.
Games. I hate Double Dragon.
Oh, that's right, you do.
Shite, terrible game. But Golden Axe a classic. But there's a game that it's funny, I never owned this game. I never even owned the console, but it's one of the most iconic games of that era. Do you remember a game called Guardian Heroes?
Nope, I don't think so. But Derik can pull it up and we can see it.
Well, Guardian Heroes, it was on the Saturn, the Sega Saturn, and has to be one of the most iconic games that people have been crying out for as like a spiritual follow-up.
Dude, that's cool. Like there's a lot of scaling going on here, them jumping back and forth between the background and the foreground.
Yes,
I love it when they do stuff like that.
So it's built on planes, your 3 planes. What's quite cool as well is as you go through the game, there's different paths that you can take, and you can then play as the different characters that you collect and meet. So each one of them has a different path-based story.
There's 3 planes. Wow.
I would suggest you add this to your list, your backlog. I love this game so much. I never owned it or a Saturn, and I still think it's one of them.
Is it only on the Saturn? Has it been ported to anything else?
I do not believe it's ported.
Oh man, then I'll never play it.
It is an absolute classic. So more of that kind of thing, and that's something to the point earlier about getting children into things that were older. If I said to Billy, let's go and play Golden Axe, he'd probably play it, and I would imagine after not too long he'd be like, this is a bit slow and janky and they don't move quite fluidly. However, the game that me and him have played more for the last 6 years, more than any other game, is a game called Castle Crashers.
Oh God, I love that game. That is a fantastic game. I played it on 360 way back in the day. Yep.
So Castle Crashers was the game that we played. I think he was 3 when we first started playing that, because he didn't have to really participate, and I could just move the game along and kick things and kill things. So he was, away we go. We played that game so much that, I mean, you can put in an unholy amount of hours, because every time you complete with one character, you get another character, then you can complete with that character, you get another character, and you can collect bloody orbs and all sorts of shit. I honestly, I do not know how many hundreds of hours we invested in that one sodding game. And now recently there was an HD remaster on the Switch, and of course he's gone back to it.
Oh, was there? Oh, don't tell me that.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, sorry about that. And that's, essentially, what is it? It's a really pretty side-scrolling beat-em-up.
Yeah.
And it's great. But one finally, this isn't really a genre, but I'd love to see it come back a little more, is going all the way again back to 80s arcade. I want to see the concept of people like instant gratification. Fine. So I want to see the concept of Quick Go High Score. The Quick Go High Score game, the one-screen game. You're like Donkey Kong, right? They played Donkey Kong because there was a points-based system. There's still points in games, but they're quite literally pointless. So even when I played Super Mario World the other day, Super Mario World has a point scoring system. Who gives a shit? No one even looks at it. No one even looks at it.
That's true.
I'm
For the
talking
most part.
about like your shmups, like the arcades. People used to go, right, the important part of this game is like there's not shitloads to this game. You could complete it in theory in like 20 minutes if you whatever. But it's about how can I get the biggest score? How can something that's based purely around point scoring? It's like quick go, bang, this is how we do this. This is how we do this. I think that could be pretty cool.
Yeah, the single screen arcade type games. Yeah. He's got Burger Time going right now. Yeah, Burger Time's a good example.
Burger Time, an absolute classic example. And again, if it's
those would be great for phones, man, for mobile. I mean, any of those type of games is great for that sort of thing. It's almost like made for it.
And money wise, this is a game that you don't necessarily have to invest shitloads into the production, and it might sell for 99p. Great.
Yeah.
Excellent. And away we go. I think those are really great, giving you that real kind of points-based challenge, giving you an incentive. I don't think there's enough of that.
Do you know what, actually, as an example that really showcases that point, a few years ago, or might even have been longer than that now, Flappy Bird. Do you remember that craze, that phenomenon?
Yeah.
But that's the thing. It was.
Right.
I didn't really like it, but it was a really simplistic game, but that absolutely hit big time because everyone kept competing for a high score. And all you had to do was just tap.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Flappy Bird, yeah. God, that's something that I have not thought about in a while. Thanks for that, Sorren.
Might jump in here for
sure.
Guardian Legends did get a port later on to Xbox Live Arcade in 2011, but I don't know if it's available on Xbox One. And there is a sequel game for Game Boy Advance called, of course, Guardian Legends Advance.
Wait, Guardian Legends or what's it called? It's not Guardian Legends. What was it called?
I'm stupid. Guardian Heroes.
Guardian Heroes, thank you. I was like, really? There's a sequel to Guardian Legend? Tell me more. Okay, Guardian Heroes. Okay, all right. So you can...
Keep dreaming, Zed.
Yeah. Okay, so, all right. So let's wrap it up here with final thoughts. Pam, what are your final thoughts?
I think good points were made about how games work now, and I kind of now feel like these genres will be relegated to indies. Not that that's a bad thing, but the AAA companies don't want to make some money, they want to make all the money. And I'm not suggesting they put Call of Duty amounts of money into a run and gun, but if they put out like 5% of a Call of Duty budget towards a run and gun, like I think they could make okay money off it. But I would just like to see more of these genres. Castle Crashers made me think I would just love more couch co-op in general as opposed to online co-op. Yeah,
I mean, both options are great. I mean, I keep going back to Toejam and the new Toejam and Earl, but that was couch co-op and online co-op, which is great. But I know online co-op is infinitely more complex. But yeah, couch co-op, more couch co-op would be great. There's a lot on the Switch though, right? Doesn't the Switch have a ton of couch co-op games?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so.
Because I'm not a Switch player.
There you go. Got to get your Switch, Pam. Get your Switch.
Yeah.
Okay, Sorren, final thoughts?
I mean, I agree there definitely with Pam with the couch co-op. I mean, I'm massively into couch co-op. I don't know why developers seem to think that we've all become antisocial and just don't want people around our houses anymore. But I think couch co-op definitely. And yeah, I think like indie is definitely the way that we're going to see a lot of, these kind of more niche either genres or games or, game series or whatever come back because the budgets can be lower. You can kick out something that is, still really, really good. And I think the platform to get your game out there has become easier. Like back in the day, you essentially, would have had a couple of options and it would have been pretty big official options. Whereas like now, okay, granted, it does mean we get a lot of crap, but it doesn't seem to be too difficult to get your game, say, on Steam, or to get it on like things like the Nintendo eShop or the PlayStation Store or the Xbox Store. Like, it seems a little bit easier now for a smaller company to get their product out there. So,
yeah. Definitely. Okay, Justin.
I think that we always kind of come round to this, is that gaming and consumption of gaming has changed, and with it we have to accept what comes with that. So the indie approach has allowed so many more people, the kind of classic, I've talked about it before, the bedroom coders of the past have been given a platform again. So bedroom coding in the 80s allowed you to be someone who just knew how to code, and you could get a game published. Then it all got kind of crunched, and only AAA titles were what could really happen with sort of the 8-bit and 16-bit and 32-bit era. Now we've come through that again. That does, of course, mean lower budgets, but at the same time, it means there's more choice, there's more flexibility, and I think you can actually reach out to these people as well. Let's look at the positive sometimes rather than the negative of things like social media. I've had conversations with game developers, just a couple of backwards and forwards on social media, and you feel you can kind of make comments and pass back feedback, and then that there's actually a chance that might be taken on board.
Yeah, it's great for that,
So I think that's that's an important thing. So I think we're heading towards a kind of a happy medium.
I think you're right. Yeah.
I'm kind of comfortable with. So
okay, well, I guess that'll about do it. But before we go, Pam, you have a YouTube channel, and why don't you tell us about your channel and what you do?
Sure. My YouTube channel is called Cannot Be Tamed, and I do a little bit of everything. I do reviews of retro games. I do reviews of new games occasionally. I don't really stick to any one particular thing. I cover Nintendo, Super Nintendo. I love the Sega CD and FMV games, so I talk about those a fair bit. PS1, I will talk about most games, PC games. So yeah, a little bit of everything. Occasionally, I will make a sort of video essay. I recently made one complaining about the text size in modern games and how I'm old and I can't read it. But yeah, so there's a little bit of everything on there.
All right, cool. Thank you very much, Pam, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. And we got Sorren Day, Justin Day, Derik Moore, the producer, Pam from Cannot Be Tamed. I'm Zach. We're the GameFellas, and we will see you next time. Later.
Do you ever see Pam's response to comment videos? That's picking a fight with a black belt.
Pam takes no shit. Pam's like Daria. She takes no shit. So that's good.
I just recorded a new one of those yesterday.
Oh, did you? Oh, those are great. I love those when you do those.
Zach's cat is always on that chair behind. Always.
He does always make an appearance, yeah.
Yeah. And is constantly cleaning as well. Which I find hilarious.
So Rick is currently right next to me and seems very eager to come and sit on me. Although for this episode, I have dubbed him Captain Jean-Luc Ricard. But
very good.
Yes. I mean, look, he is super eager.
I can see him.
There he is.
Oh,
Look at that.
hi there.
You live in the state that doesn't make its mind up, right?
Me? Yeah. Florida's the worst.
He lives in America's dick.
Yeah. Thank you, Derik. Thank you very much.
Just on the tip.
It's true. Yeah, right on the tip. That's where I am. And it's true, man. Florida is I love it, but it's a disaster when it comes to the elections and voting, unfortunately. And I'm sure this year is going to be no different.
Pam, we got to ask the important question now. Has Lily moved since you started?
So, like 10 minutes ago, my cat was sitting on a box over to my left, and the dog was in front of her, and they were both just like miming, like one would almost bite the other, and then the other would like raise his paw and like go to smack the dog, and they were just like having this silent, strange fight.
I watched the cat for a little while on your fridge's doors, like, okay, cat's doing something.
What kind of, is she a lab of some kind? Like some sort of lab mix or?
She's a mutt. I saw her mother and father, and her mother's like some kind of pit bull beagle mix, and her father's like a husky something, and she looks like a lab. So
wow, that's
she's just a lab.
Yeah.
Wow, that's an interesting. You said beagle pit bull.
Mm-hmm.
Jeez, talk about interesting.
I don't want to know how that worked.
That's. Hey, I'll tell you what. I had a friend in college who had a Dachshund. It was a Dachshund German Shepherd mix. So, want to talk about trying to imagine how that happens? I don't know.
That wiener dog punched above his weight class there.
So, Pam, what was your first video game console or platform? What was it?
NES.
Oh my God, you're not even old enough.
I've had someone, I reviewed Phantasmagoria, which came out in 1995, and someone's like, what do you know? You weren't even born. I was like, thanks.
I do find it funny, like, because I follow you on Twitter, so I see sometimes when you post like the comment that they've put, and then your reply, and it's just like some people are like what are they even thinking?
Picking a verbal fight with Pam is like picking a fight against a black belt when you're quadriplegic.
Yeah.
Yooka!